I'll be the first to admit that I'm one of the most skeptical people I know. I don't believe in ghosts or any other paranormal stuff. I'm quick to dismiss stories that seem fake or at the very least fabricated. That's why I'm completely at a loss for words at what happened to me just weeks ago. I wanted to write all this while it was fresh in my mind. I can't explain what happened to me, and to be honest, I'm still terrified. I thought to myself, maybe if I write what happened to me and share it with the internet, maybe someone out there can explain what happened. Well, hopefully, somebody out there can explain. My friend Steve and his wife were going out of town for the weekend for their anniversary. The two of them don't travel alone a lot because they have two children and a dog. I know for some people that's a first world problem, and you're correct. But Steve isn't struggling financially. He built this massive home in the middle of nowhere because he likes privacy. And if you're fortunate enough to do that, I can't blame you. Well, for Steve and his wife, the stars were about to align perfectly. The two kids were going out of town for some type of school trip, so they were going to be alone with just the dog. When Steve told me all of this, I insisted on going over and watching the dog for the weekend so he and his wife could go on a romantic weekend getaway. He agreed, and the plan was set in stone. I would be watching his beautiful golden retriever for the weekend. I made my way to the house on Friday afternoon. I didn't work weekends, so I planned on just staying there Friday through Sunday. Steve stocked the house full of food and snacks for me and made sure I had everything I needed. It was a bit overkill for a weekend pet sitting job, but I wasn't complaining. I love dogs and I love quiet weekends, so win-win for me. Now for the scary part. On Friday night, the dog and I just hung out and watched movies. Steve sent me a text around 9 p.m. and said, "Don't get scared being all alone in that house. It can get pretty spooky at night when you're by yourself." I gave him a single LOL text back and told him to shut up. As I said before, I'm a very skeptical person. I don't get scared of empty houses or being alone in the middle of nowhere. I'm well aware that anything can happen, so I just don't get scared easily. I slept in the spare bedroom and Steve's dog came with me. We went to bed around 1 a.m. At 3:21 in the morning, I woke up to the sound of the dog barking downstairs. It was that loud and vicious barking. I won't lie, that actually did scare me, but more of the surprise scare, not that scared out of my skin kind of scare. I made my way downstairs, and the entire time, the dog never stopped barking. I finally found the dog in the kitchen, barking at the door that led to the basement. All the hair on his back was standing straight up, and the dog looked incredibly spooked by something. I was calling his name and trying to calm him down, but he just wouldn't stop barking. I grabbed the doorknob, and this sent the dog into a spiral. He was now running back and forth, barking, and just going insane. Of course, my first thought was maybe some kind of intruder in the basement. Possible, but unlikely. Steve has all that super fancy security equipment, so breaking in is not something that's easy. I grabbed a big knife from the kitchen and opened the door. The dog ran to the doorway, but didn't go down into the basement. He just stood at the frame and growled, his hair still sticking straight up. I turned the light on and descended the stairs. I started yelling a bunch of stuff, pretending to be a lot tougher than I am, but I heard or saw nothing down there. I tried calling the dog down into the basement, but he wasn't moving. I even went as far as to look all around the basement to give my mind some peace. It's a finished basement, So I looked in closets, in every corner, behind furniture, and even in the bathroom that's down there. No intruder and no evil ghosts. The only thing I did notice was how unreasonably cold it was down there. I know it's a basement, but I've been down there a million times, and it's not that cold. Even in the dead of winter, it's never that cold. At the end of the day, a cold basement is no reason to freak out and run away. I spent the rest of the night in the living room. It took a while, but the dog finally calmed down and we both fell asleep again. The next day, the dog was completely fine. We played outside for a while, and I just spent most of the day listening to music and watching movies. I went down in the basement at one point during the day, and the temperature was completely normal. It felt like the rest of the house. I didn't really spend much time giving a thought, and just went about the rest of the day. That night, I decided to stay on the couch, just in case the dog had another basement door incident. I wanted to stay up later, but I ended up falling asleep while watching a movie. Once again, at almost the exact same time, I woke up to the dog throwing a fit and barking like the house was on fire or something. I stormed into the kitchen and again, I tried getting the dog to stop barking, but he wouldn't listen for the second night in a row. But this night was different. I didn't think it was possible, but the dog was even more erratic that night than he was on the previous night. I knew nothing was down there, so I told him repeatedly that it was okay. It was like I wasn't even there. When I grabbed the door knob this time, instead of continuing to bark, he started to cry and whimper. It was the strangest thing. I let go of the knob, and when I tried to console the dog, he started barking again. I was annoyed and confused. One last time, I grabbed the knob and went downstairs. Again, the dog started to cry and still wouldn't follow me into the basement. This time was different. It was still cold down there, just like the previous night, but this time it stunk so badly. I don't know how to describe the smell other than just bad. But perhaps the weirdest thing was that some of the pictures he had on the wall of his family were knocked over, and the bar stools down there were also knocked to the ground. Other than that, nothing else was misplaced or destroyed. I picked up the bar stools and also the pictures and just set them on the bar. The smell was so overbearing that I didn't even want to be down there anymore. I went back upstairs, and for the first 30 minutes or so, the dog continued to bark, and I tried to figure out what could be the reason for the smell. When the dog finally calmed down, I gave him a treat, and we both fell asleep. When I woke up in the morning, I went into the basement to try to get to the bottom of the smell, but the smell was gone. Not even a lingering odor. Also, the dog followed me down, and he was happy as can be. For 2 nights, that dog refused to come into the basement with me. But today, he went down there without a care in the world. I was completely stumped. I had no clue what had happened the previous 2 nights. Steve got home around 1 o'clock in the morning, and as you may expect, his dog was jumping for joy. His wife took the dog outside, and I started catching up with Steve for a bit. He asked how everything was, and I told him that, for the most part, everything was great. He gave me a confused look when I said for the most part, so I explained in detail what happened over the weekend. I totally expected him to laugh and assume I was playing a joke on him. But he didn't laugh. He didn't even smile. He just stood there. He finally looked down and told me that occasionally when the dog was a puppy, he would have these barking fits and just go crazy barking at that door. Apparently, he hadn't done it in years, so Steve forgot about it. They never knew the reason. But then one night, he just stopped doing it. I could tell Steve was freaked out, a lot more freaked out than I was. We talked about it for a little longer, but ultimately, I kept telling Steve not to worry, and it's probably nothing. It's been 2 weeks, and I have not been able to stop thinking about it. Steve told me that since they've been home, the dog has been completely normal and has had no basement door episodes. I've tried looking into it myself, but I haven't found anything that could logically explain what happened. Just when I think I may have found something that sort of explains what happened, once I add everything up, it doesn't make sense. So what's the deal? Can someone out there explain to me why that dog was acting this way? What was the smell and where did it come from? I need help, people. I'm losing sleep, and I don't even live in that house. I just want some sort of answer. Look, I'll be completely upfront with you guys. I am the biggest skeptic you will ever meet. I'm the guy who rolls his eyes at ghost hunting shows and tries to find the logical explanation for every creaky floorboard or weird shadow. I just don't buy into the paranormal. Or at least, I didn't until a couple of weeks ago. I'm writing this down now because it's still fresh in my brain. And honestly, I'm hoping someone on the internet can give me a logical explanation so I can finally get some sleep. My buddy Dave and his wife recently celebrated their 10-year anniversary. Because they have 3 young kids and a high-maintenance dog, they rarely get to go anywhere, just the 2 of them. But the stars finally aligned. The kids were shipped off to a week-long summer camp, leaving just the dog at home. Dave isn't exactly hurting for cash. A few years ago, he built this massive, custom, modern industrial house out in the absolute middle of nowhere in the Pacific Northwest. He loves his privacy, and if you have the money to buy 100 acres of thick forest, more power to you. When he told me about their anniversary trip to Napa Valley, I practically volunteered to watch their dog, a massive, goofy black lab named Cooper. I work remotely anyway, so a quiet weekend at a luxury cabin with a cool dog sounded like a paid vacation. I drove out there on a Thursday afternoon. Dave had completely over-prepared for me. The fridge was stocked with premium steaks, expensive beer, and enough snacks to survive a zombie apocalypse. It was a win-win situation. Friday night is when things started getting weird. Cooper and I were just chilling on the massive leather sectional, watching Netflix. Around 9:30 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from Dave. "Don't let the house spook you tonight, man. It gets pretty creepy out there in the woods when you're all by yourself." I just texted back a laughing emoji and told him to enjoy his wine. Like I said, I don't scare easily. An empty house in the woods doesn't bother me. I decided to sleep in the main guest room on the first floor, and Cooper happily followed me in, curling up on the rug at the foot of the bed. We crashed around midnight. At exactly 3:14 a.m., I jolted awake. Cooper was barking, not his usual, "Hey, the mailman is here" bark. This was a deep, chest-rattling, vicious sound. It startled the hell out of me, more of a jump scare than actual fear. I threw off the blankets and followed the noise down the hallway. Cooper was standing in the kitchen, aggressively barking at the heavy oak door that led down to Dave's finished basement. Every single hair along the dog's spine was standing straight up in a rigid line. He looked absolutely terrified, but ready to fight. I kept calling his name, trying to snap him out of it, but he completely ignored me. He just kept lunging at the door and snapping his jaws. When I reached out and grabbed the doorknob, Cooper lost his absolute mind. He started pacing frantically, barking so loud it hurt my ears. Naturally, my logical brain kicked in. Intruder. It was highly unlikely, considering Dave's house has a top-tier smart security system with perimeter cameras, but it was the only thing that made sense. Pulled a heavy cast-iron skillet off the stove. Hey, it was the closest thing to a weapon I had, and cracked the door open. Cooper scrambled backward. He refused to cross the threshold. He just stood at the top of the stairs, growling into the dark. I flipped the stairwell light on and walked down. I even yelled a few threats, trying to sound like a tough guy, but the basement was dead silent. I called for Cooper to follow me, but he wouldn't budge. I did a full sweep of that basement. I checked behind the custom wet bar, inside the storage closets, in the downstairs bathroom, and behind the massive home theater seating. Nothing. No broken windows, no intruders, no ghosts. But there was one thing I couldn't ignore. It was freezing. And I don't mean a little drafty. It felt like I had walked into a meat locker. I could literally see my breath puffing out in white clouds. I've hung out in that basement with Dave playing pool a dozen times, even in the dead of winter, and it has never been that cold. Still, my skeptic brain rationalized it. HVAC glitch, I told myself. Broken thermostat. I went back upstairs, locked the door, and slept on the living room couch with Cooper, who took nearly an hour to finally stop trembling and fall asleep. Saturday was totally normal. The sun came up and Cooper was his usual goofy self. We played fetch in the yard, I grilled a steak, and we hung out. I even went down to the basement around noon to check the thermostat. The temperature was perfectly normal. It felt just like the rest of the house. I brushed off the weirdness of the night before and went about my day. That night, I didn't want to take any chances. So I set up camp on the living room couch right from the start. I was trying to stay awake, but I drifted off during a movie. Once again, at almost the exact same time, 3:18 a.m., I was ripped out of my sleep. Cooper was at the basement door again. But this time, it was different. I rushed into the kitchen, expecting the same aggressive barking, but Cooper wasn't acting tough tonight. He was backed into the corner of the kitchen cabinets, his tail tucked completely between his legs, letting out this pathetic, high-pitched crying sound. I tried to tell him it was okay, but it was like he was looking right through me. When I grabbed at the brass doorknob, the dog let out a sharp yelp and scrambled out of the kitchen entirely, hiding under the dining room table. Annoyed, a little freaked out, and wanting this to just be over, I ripped the door open and flipped the switch. Instantly, I was hit by two things. First, the freezing cold was back. It chilled me to the bone. Second was the smell. It was horrific. It smelled like raw sewage mixed with rotting meat. It was so potent, it physically made my eyes water and my stomach heave. I pulled my shirt over my nose and slowly walked down the stairs. When I reached the bottom, my jaw dropped. The heavy, solid wood bar stools that sat in front of the wet bar were violently scattered across the room. Two of them were completely overturned. Dave had this wall of framed, signed sports jerseys. and 3 of them had been ripped off the wall. The heavy glass frames were shattered across the luxury vinyl floor. Nothing else was touched. Nothing was stolen. Just localized destruction. I didn't even care about being a skeptic anymore. The smell was so suffocating, and the energy in that room was so incredibly oppressive that my flight response kicked into high gear. I didn't clean up the glass. I didn't pick up the stools. I sprinted up the stairs, slammed the door, locked the deadbolt, and dragged a heavy dining chair in front of it. Cooper and I huddled in the living room until the sun came up. I didn't sleep a single wink. By 9 a.m. on Sunday, I mustered up the courage to go back down there. I grabbed a trash bag to clean up the broken glass before Dave got home. I opened the door. The smell, completely gone. The temperature, perfectly room level. And the craziest part, Cooper trotted right past me, bounded down the stairs, and started sniffing around the bar like absolutely nothing had happened. He had been terrified of that door for 2 nights, and now he was completely unfazed. Dave and his wife pulled into the driveway around 2 p.m. Cooper lost his mind with excitement, greeting them at the door. Dave's wife took the dog out to the yard, and Dave came into the kitchen to settle up with me. "How was the weekend, man?" he asked, grabbing a water from the fridge. "Mostly good," I said carefully. He stopped and looked at me. "Mostly." I didn't hold back. I told him everything. I told him about the barking, the freezing cold, the horrific smell, and the broken frames in the basement. I fully expected him to laugh in my face and call me crazy. He didn't laugh. All the color drained from his face. He just stood there, staring at the floor. Finally, he looked up at me, his voice totally quiet. When Cooper was a puppy, right after we finished building this house, he used to do that. He would wake up at 3 a.m. and just lose his mind barking at that basement door. It went on for months. Dave swallowed hard. We never figured out why. Had exterminators come out, checked for gas leaks, everything. Then one day, he just stopped doing it. He hasn't done it in 5 years. Dave was visibly shaken, much more shaken than I was. I ended up being the one trying to calm him down, telling him it was probably just a weird coincidence or a pest issue we couldn't see. But honestly, I was lying. It's been 2 weeks since I stayed at that house. Dave texted me yesterday and said Cooper hasn't looked at the basement door once since they got back. I've been scouring the internet, looking for logical, scientific explanations. Changes in barometric pressure, strange animal pheromones, weird electrical frequencies, anything. But nothing explains the freezing cold combined with that rotting smell. Nothing explains the physical force required to throw heavy wooden bar stools across a room. I am a skeptic. I believe in science and logic. But I am losing sleep over this because the math just doesn't add up. If there is anyone out there who has experienced something like this, or who knows what might have caused this, please tell me. Because right now, the only explanations left are the ones I've spent my whole life refusing to believe.